My name is Damon Wilson, and I work as a housing director slash case manager for Spiritus Christi Prison Outreach, which is a housing program dedicated to housing formerly incarcerated individuals. Well, I found out about the commission actually through the church. So I volunteer for the Memorial AME Zion Food Pantry, and the director of that program sends out a generic email about different things that are happening in the community. And in this one particular email, it listed the commission as something that was widely being promoted, and that the mayor's office and the county exec's office were very serious about promoting within the community. Yes. So redlining is based on how neighborhoods are divided. HOLC, HOLC, Homeowners Loan Corporation, was a part of the GI Bill that was initially instituted after the war. And what they were doing were they were giving loans to soldiers at a subsidized rate. So they were taking a lot of money off, to get soldiers returning from the war and get them into their own home. So in order for them to know which were the best neighborhoods to go to, they actually sent agents out, and they looked at the neighborhoods and they tried to see how many people of color were in the area. For the areas that had high concentrations of colored people, those were the red areas, saying hazardous. Do not send loans in this area. But for those that had the fewest colored people in there, those were the green and the blue areas, saying these are the best places to offer loans.
Why you smiling? Why you so damn happy? You ain't got nothing.
You be happy feeling for yourself.
I know, but you already know. Like, I ain't telling you nothing new.
No. Housing's bad here. Yeah.
Do not want to talk to me about that.
I know. Housing's bad here. It sure is. And when you do get into decent housing, you might keep your yard looking good, but their yard looks bad.
That's the whole help your neighbor, that nobody does.
Or when there are very few jobs that are proximate to where you live. Well, people have to start improvising. When they start improvising, what does that look like? Well, people start doing things like getting involved in illegal narcotics, which is a problem that we know that we have in the city. Hey, here's something that's really interesting I've been watching. Everybody knows that over the course of the last year, crime has been skyrocketing. Why is that? Well, some people say it's just because of the social and emotional toll of being in a pandemic, and I'm sure that there's certainly some of that that's occurred. But it's also the case that in the same way that you can't get furniture or you can't get metal parts and all that kind of stuff because the supply chains have been disrupted in the pandemic, it's also true for illegal narcotics. And if those supply chains have been disrupted, what we're seeing now is turf war, retaliatory violence, right? But that's all a function of these disparities, of these differential outcomes. What happens then? People get involved in the criminal justice system. It makes marital prospects more difficult. People end up in improvised families, right? And so I hear some of my conservative friends say, oh man, if these people would just have personal responsibility, that would solve the challenge. Except for the fact that when we track back where we see the decisions being coming from, the environmental factors that are at play, we have to concede that this history of racism and injustice and the differential outcomes that it's created for people of color has at least something, perhaps the most significant thing to do with the behavioral patterns that we see.
When we speak about, when you speak about not only narcotics, but makes me think of certain areas that I can think of in my head, right? Not calling out certain areas, but when I go to Jefferson, you know what I mean? I see some things, some brothers on the street.
No doubt.
You know what I mean? So I did a short film titled John Said, and it was for Jiva Theater. And basically, I decided to show the boondocks and the burbs. So I grew up in Penfield, and then left when I was around 13, 12. Went to the city. My dad owns a restaurant, so we moved because we weren't trying to drive 20 minutes on my parents and stuff like that. So they put me in the programs. But I know that I was associated with a whole bunch of different programs, whether it be the Baobab Community Center, or whether it be down at Nazareth where they teach me a little bit of math, and then we go on to art.
I know what I feel. You know what I'm saying? Like I know what I feel and I know what I see, right? And I know I'm not, it made me feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like when I'm thinking about, like we need to be doing more. Why am I not seeing more business? I built this building from the ground up, right? 17 years ago. I'm one of the few people that of color in this city that's built anything from the ground up in this city in over 20 years. Why is that? You know what I'm saying? And I know how difficult it was for me to do it. I know how hard it was. You know, it was very hard. And the odds were against me, and I had banks take out risk on me. You know what I'm saying? And so I knew that when we went out, that's why I wanted to do the bus tour. That's why I wanted people to come out and talk to these people, because I already knew what they was gonna say. I already knew what they were gonna say, because I know what I experienced myself, and I know what I see, right? Every day when I look out the window of my business, you know what I mean? I know what I see. And so when others came out and started hearing the testimonies of, we haven't got any help, we don't know what help is available, we don't even know where to go, we don't know where to call, we don't even have time, even if we could, you know, why isn't somebody coming to us? Where's the outreach? Where's the services? You know what I mean? And so I'm saying to myself, because I've been here 17 years and ain't nobody came to me. And I'm in gut.
And that's where job creation becomes important to me, is because we need these businesses to stay open because they're more accessible for us. That has a whole other aspect of everything else when it comes to human services, and it all interconnects because it connects to the wraparound services that jobs bring. It's just, if you're more likely to be able to reach your job because it's around the corner, you're more likely to go to work. You're more likely to stay at that job and maintain that job because it's not as much of a burden to find transportation to get out there. Or maybe you have daycare locally around, and everything connects. So I think business development, job creation go hand in hand, because we want to create jobs, we want to develop business, but we want to focus on the areas like here, like you just said, like on Lake Avenue, right over here on Dewey. We want to increase jobs in these areas because the people in these areas will benefit most, because one, the jobs are easier to access, and it just brings up the value of the homes here, and then it just, all in all, it impacts everything else, and almost like a domino effect.
Of teachers and 70.1% of the overall school district staff live outside the city of Rochester, that ultimately those public dollars, through the forms of salary, benefits, pensions, ultimately end up leaving the city of Rochester and creating a lot of benefit in our surrounding towns. How does that happen? Well, when people get home, what do? They pay taxes, right? Those taxes fund schools. They fund police departments. They fund the county budget. What's another way that it happens? People buy and sell things, so you have the generation of commercial activity. Now, one of the things that's fascinating about Rochester, and this is a really interesting proof point, is that one of the reasons why the city of Rochester maintains a really strong credit rating is because we have a sales tax sharing formula here in Monroe County. And what that basically means is that they collect up all the sales tax that's generated all across the county, and then there's a proportional formula through which those sales taxes are allocated to the various municipalities that make up Monroe County. That formula has been constructed in such a way that it allows for the city of Rochester to obtain a more equitable share of the sales tax that's being generated, right? And so it's one of the reasons why the city budget remains relatively stable. Here's the challenge, though.
So what you find is that poverty were concentrated in several areas around the city. And because of this redlining, and banks basically just saying these are the bad areas, do not invest in these areas, we started to see that people of color ended up living together in these concentrated areas, and these are some of the poorest areas of the cities, which continue to this day. Rochester, we have the Clinton Ave area and the lower southwest, kind of the Cornhill area. Those were the highest concentration of BIPOC community members because of the redlining. And it has not changed for the past 50, 60, 70 years.
Now, is it because of this? Because those areas were denied funding and denied the money that is needed that maybe the suburbs would get, or?
Yes. So for example, so if I want to buy a house, let's just say a house costs $100,000. I don't have $100,000 in my pocket, right? So I need to go to the bank to get that loan. Well, one of the first questions the bank is going to ask you is, what area are you looking at? So you tell them, okay, I want to live in area B that has more black people. They'll look at you like, okay, well, your loan has been denied. Versus, let's say if I want to get that same loan and say, hey, I want to move to neighborhood A. They look at, okay, not many black people. Oh, all right, here you go. Now, mind you, that's really for white Americans, because even if they did want to move into, let's just say, an urban area or a high poverty area, the bank wouldn't give it to them. But